Okay, so today we're going to start on section 4, lesson 2 of Making the Scientist. And what we're going to do is we're going to continue reading out of our Hidden Figure book. And we are really going to now start focusing on Katherine Johnson. We have all of that wonderful background knowledge about how NASA was originally NACA, NACA, and we learned all about the women computers that worked there. Now, when I say computers, obviously I'm not talking about an actual computer, but it was their job to solve all of the math problems that made their flight possible. So, while we are reading today, or while the lady reads to us, I want you to be focusing on what do we learn about Catherine specifically and what type of person she was. All right, so we're going to read chapters 12 and 13.
This
Catherine
is
seems
Dave,
to go
head of
away.
marketing at a ketchup company, about to use Grammarly to handle a tight deadline.
Chapter 12 An Exceptional Mind. Like Mary Jackson, Catherine Goebel was a gifted mathematician who put her talents to work as a teacher. She was quite content with her life as a wife and mother, teaching math and French in Marion, Virginia. It would be years before she learned of the work being done at the NACA in Hampton. But everything would change in August 1952 when she attended a family wedding. At the wedding, Catherine's husband's brother-in-law told Catherine that the government was hiring Black women to work as mathematicians at Langley. He knew she had studied mathematics in college and graduate school. He was the director of the Newsom Park Community Center, where Dorothy Vaughan and her family lived. He knew Dorothy had quite a few of the women working for her in West Computing. Catherine listened carefully. She and her husband were public school teachers with modest paychecks. They had 3 daughters and had to manage their budget carefully to cover all of their family's needs. She enjoyed teaching and felt a sense of responsibility to advance the race by giving her students the best possible education, even though they attended segregated schools with fewer resources. But now, the mention of the opportunity at Langley reminded her of something she had almost forgotten: the dream of being a professional mathematician. After many years, it looked as if that dream just might come true. A mind for math. Catherine's father was a math whiz. Though educated only through the 6th grade, he could tell how much lumber a tree would yield just by looking at it. From the time she was a toddler, Catherine's parents realized that she had inherited her father's mind for math. Catherine, the youngest of 4 children, counted whatever crossed her path: dishes, steps, and stars in the sky. She excelled in school, especially in math. Whenever her teachers noticed that Catherine's desk was empty, they would look for her in the classroom next door, where they would find her helping her older brother with his math lesson. Catherine graduated from high school at age 14. In 1933, she enrolled at West Virginia State Institute, a Black college outside Charleston. By her junior year, she had tackled every math course the school offered, so her math professor created special advanced math classes just for her. You would make a good research mathematician, her professor told Catherine when she was a sophomore. I am going to prepare you for this career. He believed in Catherine and her special ability, even though job prospects were poor. In the 1930s, employers openly discriminated against Irish and Jewish women with math degrees. The odds of a Black woman finding work as a mathematician were especially low. After graduation, Catherine took a job teaching at the high school in Marion, Virginia. She met Jimmy Goebel, and they fell in love and married, but they kept their marriage secret. Catherine loved teaching, but at the time, the law didn't allow married women in the classroom as teachers. Unusually capable. In the spring of 1940, at the end of a busy school day, Catherine was surprised to find the president of her former college waiting outside her classroom. He said he had a special opportunity for her because no graduate programs were offered at any Black colleges in the state. The all-white West Virginia University could be forced to admit African Americans to their graduate programs in order to comply with a Supreme Court order. If a state didn't operate a separate graduate school for Black students, it would be required to integrate its existing graduate schools. Since there were no graduate programs for Black students in the entire state of West Virginia, the law said that the white school had to open its doors to Blacks. The governor of West Virginia didn't want to fight the law. Instead, he planned to integrate the state's public graduate schools. He asked for the names of 3 unusually capable West Virginia State College graduates who might be willing to desegregate the university. Catherine was asked to be one of the three. The other two were men who would be entering the law school. Catherine accepted a place in the graduate school studying mathematics. On her last day teaching at the high school, Catherine's principal presented her with a full set of math reference books. He wanted her to succeed, and he feared that, as one of the school's first black students, she might have trouble accessing the books she needed at the white school's library.
Oh, these ads.
Good morning, contestants.
Catherine enrolled in West Virginia University summer session. Her mother moved to Morgantown, West Virginia, to room with her daughter, hoping to help her navigate what could be a difficult situation if the white students chose to bully her or call her names. As it turned out, most of the white students welcomed Catherine, and some went out of their way to be friendly. Only one classmate gave her any trouble, and that student just tried to insult Catherine by ignoring her. The professors treated her fairly, and Catherine more than met the academic standard. Her greatest challenge, finding a course that didn't repeat what she had already learned. At the end of the summer session, Catherine found that she and her husband were expecting a baby. Being quietly married was one thing, but having a baby was another. Catherine and her husband announced the news to her family, who were overjoyed, although they realized that she was going to have to leave school. Catherine became a full-time wife and mother. She and Jimmy eventually had 3 daughters. She never regretted putting family life ahead of graduate school. In 1944, Catherine took a job teaching at the local black high school to help support her family. She remained that job until she learned about the opportunity at Langley in 1952. After listening to their brother-in-law describe the job at Langley, Catherine and her husband Jimmy decided to take the leap and move to Newport News. When they arrived, they moved into an apartment in Newsom Park. Her husband got a stable, well-paid job as a painter at the Newport News shipyard. Their 3 children loved their new school and marveled at being part of such a large and dynamic black community. Langley's personnel department approved Catherine's job application as a computer in 1952, but she didn't start work until June 1953. In the meantime, she worked as a substitute math teacher at the high school, which allowed her to meet a lot of families in the area. She was involved with her sorority and her church. She developed a social network and met the woman who would become a lifelong best friend, Eunice Smith, who lived 3 blocks away and was a 9-year veteran at West Computing. When Catherine started work, she and Eunice decided to drive to the office together. It was a great surprise for Catherine to find not only that her new boss, Dorothy Vaughn, was a fellow West Virginian, but that their families had once been neighbors. It didn't take long for Catherine to appreciate that Dorothy wasn't just a talented mathematician. She was also a great supervisor. For 2 weeks, Catherine worked at her new desk in West Computing, hitting the ground running. Then one morning, an engineer came into the office and quietly conferred with Dorothy. The Flight Research Division needs 2 new computers, Dorothy Vaughn announced. The Flight Research Division was a group that specialized in testing real planes rather than wind tunnels. Catherine and Irma, I'm sending the 2 of you, assigning Catherine and another West computer to the job. Confusing signals. For Catherine, being given an assignment in the Flight Research Division, whose office was on the top floor of Langley's gigantic hangar, felt like good fortune. She had been elated to work in the pool and calculate her way through the data sheets, but being sent to work closely with the engineers was even more exciting. With just her lunch bag and purse to carry, Catherine went over to the hangar, which was a short walk from the West Computing office. She slipped in the side door, climbed the stairs, and walked down a dim cinder block hallway to the Flight Research Laboratory. Inside, the room smelled like coffee and cigarettes. The engineers smoked and drank coffee all day while they were working. Like West Computing, the office was set up in classroom style with about 20 desks. Most of the people on the team were men, but there were a few other women in the group working as computers. Catherine looked for a place to wait for her new bosses. She went to an empty cube and sat down next to a white engineer. Before she had a chance to say hello, the man gave her a sideways glance, then got up and walked away. Had she done something wrong? No one else noticed what happened, but Catherine didn't know whether his action was meant to be insulting. It could have been because she was black and he was white. It could have been because she was a woman and he was a man. It could have been because he was a professional and she was a sub-professional. Or it could have meant nothing at all. Outside the Langley campus, the rules were clear. Blacks and whites lived separately, ate separately, studied separately, socialized separately, worshipped separately, and for the most part, worked separately. At Langley, the boundaries were fuzzy. Some of her colleagues were Northerners or foreigners who'd never so much as met a black person before arriving at Langley. Others were from the Deep South with strong attitudes about racial mixing. It was all part of the racial relations laboratory at Langley. Blacks and whites were exploring new ground together. Catherine and the other black mathematicians mounted a charm offensive. They made a special effort to always be well-dressed, well-spoken, patriotic, and upright. They were keenly aware that the interactions that individual blacks had with whites could have implications for the entire black community. Within 2 weeks, whatever had caused the engineer to move away from Catherine's desk had faded from mind as the two got to know one another. The man was more than pleased when he discovered that his new office mate was a fellow transplant from West Virginia, and they became fast friends. West Virginia never left Catherine's heart, but Virginia, it would soon be clear, was her destiny.
Alright,
This is one of the millions of new and used cars you can find on Auto Trader.
We're going to now hear about her time.
Chapter 13, Turbulence. After 6 months, Catherine Goble's temporary assignment to the Flight Research Division was starting to look permanent. At the beginning of 1954, Dorothy Vaughan sat down with Catherine's boss in the division. "Either give her a raise or send her back to me," Dorothy said. Although Catherine had spent only 2 weeks in the West Area Computing Office when she first arrived at Langley, she was still Dorothy's responsibility. The way Dorothy saw the matter, Catherine should either be classified as a permanent member of West Computing and continue to rotate through other temporary assignments, or she should become an official member of the Flight Research Division. Even though the manager Catherine reported to was not an advocate of women in the workforce, the meeting ended as both the manager and Dorothy Vaughan knew it would. Catherine received an offer to join the division full-time with an increase in salary. The engineers who worked with Catherine realized that she was a keeper soon after she showed them her mathematical skills. Her familiarity with higher-level math made her a versatile addition to the branch. The Flight Research Division was a collection of high-energy, free-thinking, aggressive, and very smart engineers. They spent their time not in the wind tunnels, but with live aircraft. They were serious about their work. The head of the Flight Research Division had actually trained as a test pilot in order to improve the quality of his research reports. The division was the kind of place that would not show patience to anyone, male or female, who took too long to figure out how things were supposed to be done. Fortunately, Catherine Goble's natural curiosity and her confidence in her own mathematical ability gave her the courage to ask the engineers a lot of questions. They didn't hesitate to explain what they knew. They spent a good part of their lives thinking about flight, and they could talk about it endlessly. Branches within the Flight Research Division investigated different topics, such as planes that could travel faster than the speed of sound, and even ones that might be capable of flying into outer space. One of the tasks of the Maneuver Loads branch, where Catherine worked, was to examine safety concerns and investigate plane crashes. A bumpy ride. Catherine's first assignment in the group was to help figure out what went wrong in an accident involving a small Piper propeller plane. The plane, which was flying along in an unremarkable fashion, literally fell out of this clear blue sky and crashed without apparent cause. The National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics received the plane's flight recorder, a device that tracks an aircraft's speed, acceleration, altitude, and other measures of flight. The information was essential to figuring out what had happened. It was Catherine's job to analyze the photographic images of the plane's instruments, recorded in very small increments of time. Hour after hour, day after day, she looked through a film reader, studying what was happening to the plane before the crash. She learned that the propeller plane flew in the path perpendicular to that of a larger jet plane that had passed through the area a few minutes before. The engineers set up an experiment recreating the circumstances of the accident, flying a test plane into the trailing wake of a larger plane. The data from that experiment also arrived on Catherine's desk. It was eye-straining, monotonous computer work, but Catherine loved it. When the engineers analyzed Catherine's work, they were fascinated to recognize something they hadn't realized before. The data showed that the air disturbance caused by a jet that flew past could trouble the air for as long as a half hour after it had passed through. This wave of air had tripped up the smaller propeller plane as it flew through it, causing it to stumble and crash. This was a revelation, and Catherine was thrilled to be a part of the team that uncovered it. The research done by Catherine and the engineers on the team led to changes in air traffic regulations, requiring minimum distances between flight paths to prevent similar accidents. Catherine thought the report was one of the most interesting things she had ever read. She also felt satisfied to have helped with such an important project. From the beginning, Catherine felt at home at Langley. She took a genuine liking to her new colleagues, who were opinionated, high energy, and interesting. Best of all, as far as Catherine was concerned, they were smart as whips. Like other Black people, Catherine was aware that the discrimination existed at Langley just as it existed in other areas of life, but she made the decision to block it out of her daily routine. She refused to allow herself to worry about it too much. When she first took the job, she didn't realize the bathrooms were segregated. Not every building had a offensive bathroom sign, and the ones for the white women were unmarked. As far as Catherine was concerned, there was no reason why she shouldn't use the unmarked bathrooms as well. The next challenge. After they'd been living in Newsom Park for 2 years, Catherine's husband said, "I want to move our girls out of the projects." Living in the subdivision when they first arrived in town had made it possible for the family to become a part of the Black community in the area very quickly, but they decided to move to Mimosa Crescent, a World War II era neighborhood in Hampton that had been built for middle-class Black families. In 1946, Mimosa Crescent had more than doubled in size, growing from its original 22 houses to 51. The area attracted more prosperous families who were able to afford the 3 and 4 bedroom brick houses. With a lovely new home, a job she loved, and her 3 daughters, all doing well in school, Catherine felt she was living the American dream, at least for a while. Then, over the course of 1955, her husband began to feel sick, first with headaches, then with unexplained weakness. Ultimately, his doctors discovered a tumor at the base of his skull where it could not be treated. His health declined over more than a year, and much of that time he was in the hospital. Catherine's husband, James Francis Goebel, died 5 days before Christmas in 1956. Catherine was devastated, of course, but she refused to give in to her grief. She had made a promise to her husband that she would do everything in her power to keep their bright, lively daughters on the path that they had paved for them. Catherine allowed herself and the girls until the end of the year to mourn, and then she expected them all to get back to work. On the first day of school in January 1957, Catherine met with the school principal. "It is very important that you don't show the girls any special treatment or let up on them in any way," she said. "They are going to college and they need to be prepared." Now that she was a single mother, Catherine established the new household rules. "You will have my clothes ironed and ready in the morning and dinner when I come home," she told her daughters. Catherine was now both mother and father, the one who offered love and discipline, the sole breadwinner. Each of them would have to work hard to pull the family through the difficult time. The Goebel children excelled in school. They took piano and violin lessons and practiced diligently. They were good-natured, outgoing, and respectful. With her steady gaze on the future, Catherine led her daughters toward the long-promised blessings of democracy. She wasn't leading the life she had expected, but she accepted the new challenges with dignity. Catherine's husband's death divided her life in two. As a couple, they had walked side by side through graduate school and marriage, the birth of their children, and their move to Newport News. Now, at just 38 years old, she was a widow and a single mother, as well as a professional woman realizing her intellectual dream. Her husband wouldn't be there to see those dreams come to fruition, but he had helped get her career launched. All that had come before would connect to all that was to come. In January 1957, Catherine's daughters went back to school and she went back to work. The second act of her life was about to begin.
Okay, so now that we have read the chapters we're going to read in the book, let's go ahead and discuss those. So let's react to what we just read, okay? So at the very beginning of chapter 12, it said that Catherine was unusually capable. So what does that mean, unusually capable? When you are capable of doing something, that means you can do it. So if she was unusually capable, that means she was doing things that most people thought that she couldn't do. And in this case, it meant that she was in middle school and getting ready to graduate high school. And how do we know that Catherine was unusually capable? Well, I mean, again, she was in middle school and she was doing high school math. Like, she was very good at what she did. So, how was the social dynamic different at Langley than the actual city where Langley was located? Well, in this case, the city where Langley was located and the Langley campus were both still segregated, but in on Langley's campus, there were the African Americans were more recognized for their work, even though they had to be separated into those two different buildings. And how did Catherine Goble's work bring about changes to the air traffic regulations? Well, there was that airplane crash where the plane just crashed out of the sky for no apparent reason. And Catherine's work was actually able to figure out why it crashed. And then they were able to change the safety regulations to fix that. All right. So, obviously you're not going to do this on Nerd Inc., but how did Catherine Goble's work bring about changes to air traffic regulations? That is the question you're going to be answering today. Now, um, obviously, you can't use it as a text-based question because you don't have the text in front of you. So I just want you to answer this question right here. How did Catherine Goble's work bring about changes to air traffic regulations? I want you to go back into the video and I want you to listen to that section again, and I want you to give me some good detail about that plane crash and how it brought and how Catherine's work was able to change the rules that they had for planes. All right, so that's it for today, and I will see you soon. Miss you, buddy.